Have you ever, like, walked into a room, forgot entirely why you were there, and, for just a split second, wondered if someone secretly rearranged your furniture just to mess with you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it is such a profoundly unsettling feeling.
Right. You start looking around for hidden cameras, just waiting for that eerie Twilight Zone theme music to start playing in the background.
Yeah, and even when you know it's just a momentary brain glitch, your heart rate spikes. We just rely so heavily on our environment making sense,
Yeah.
and when it doesn't, panic sets in almost immediately.
It really does. But imagine if that feeling wasn't a glitch. Imagine if someone was actively orchestrating that confusion. Welcome to the Deep Dive Lab.
I am so excited for this one.
Me too. Today, we are wading into some fascinating and honestly slightly terrifying waters. We are looking at the mechanics of gaslighting.
Yeah, it's a huge topic.
It is. We've gathered this massive stack of recent academic research spanning everything from behavioral psychology to relationship sociology and even medical ethics to figure out how someone can literally hack your reality.
And we really need to look at the science here because it's everywhere right now.
Exactly. Our mission today is to cut through all that noise. We want to unpack what gaslighting actually is beyond the internet buzzword. We're going to see how it manipulates our neural pathways and how it shows up everywhere, from your romantic relationships to the boardroom and, well, even in your doctor's office.
I mean, it is a term that has completely saturated our culture lately. You see it on social media, in op-eds, pop psychology blogs.
Oh, yeah, you can't escape it.
Right. But looking at the empirical data, it reveals a much more complex and much more systemic mechanism than most people realize. It isn't just about lying. It's really about power.
So whether you're trying to make sense of a confusing dynamic in your own life or, navigating some tricky workplace politics, or you just want to understand the actual science behind a word that is suddenly everywhere, we've got you covered, you're definitely going to want to stick around for this one.
For sure. And to really understand where the science is currently at, it helps to look at the cultural origins.
Yeah, let's start there.
Because despite its recent explosion online, the conceptualization of this abuse isn't actually a product of the social media age.
Not at all. In fact, it's straight out of classic Hollywood.
Yeah.
The term literally comes from a 1938 play by Patrick Hamilton.
Which is pretty wild to think about.
Right. And it was turned into a massive 1944 Hollywood blockbuster movie called Gaslight, starring Ingrid Bergman and Charles Boyer. If you haven't seen it, the plot is just wild.
It really is a classic for a reason.
So basically, the husband is secretly trying to steal his wife's wealth. And to do it, he sets out to drive her clinically insane.
Just incredibly sinister stuff.
Oh, totally. He secretly dims the gas lamps in their house, and when she asks why it's getting dark, he tells her she's completely imagining things.
Yeah.
He fabricates this entirely false reality until she starts to believe her own mind is fractured.
And, the physical dimming of the light is such a brilliant metaphor for the dimming of her own psychological clarity. It perfectly illustrates that slow, methodical nature of the manipulation.
Right. Yeah, and here is the wow fact that totally surprised me when I was digging into our sources for this deep dive. Gaslighting actually entered the medical lexicon decades ago.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that.
Right. It first showed up in a 1969 paper in the prestigious medical journal The Lancet. The authors, Russell Barton and J. Whitehead, used the term to describe a really dark, real-world phenomenon.
Which was the involuntary hospitalization of patients, right?
Exactly. Patients whose relatives were essentially manipulating the psychiatric system to get them locked up.
That 1969 paper is a crucial milestone. After that, the concept hovered in the background of psychoanalytic literature for quite a few decades.
It's kind of flying under the radar.
Yeah, exactly. It really wasn't until Dr. Robin Stern from the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence published her book, The Gaslight Effect, in 2007, that the underlying psychological mechanisms were brought back into public consciousness.
And boy, did it re-enter. I mean, fast forward to 2022, and Merriam-Webster literally named gaslighting their word of the year.
Because the search volume just exploded.
Yeah. Searches for the term had spiked by 1,740%. It's literally everywhere. Okay, let's unpack this. How does this actually work?
Mechanically, you mean?
Yeah, like mechanically in our brains. How does a sane, rational person get convinced that their own eyes and ears are lying to them?
Well, what's fascinating here is the cognitive mechanics behind it, which were brilliantly outlined in a 2025 study.
Oh, I read that one.
Yeah, it was published in the Personality and Social Psychology Review. The researchers, Willis Klein, Suzanne Wood, and Jennifer A. Bartz, proposed a theoretical framework explaining that humans rely fundamentally on something called shared reality theory and epistemic trust.
Okay, let's pause on that. Epistemic trust. So, epistemic meaning knowledge. Trusting someone else's knowledge or understanding of the truth over our own.
In a sense, yes, but it goes deeper than just taking someone's word for it. As humans, we are highly social creatures, We do
Right.
not process reality in a vacuum.
That makes sense.
Evolutionarily speaking, we actively need our close relationships to verify our experience of the world. Think about a very basic scenario. If you hear a strange noise in the house at night, what do?
I immediately look at my partner to see if they heard it too.
Exactly. You automatically look to them. If they react, your reality is confirmed. But if they look completely serene and say, I didn't hear anything, you immediately doubt your own auditory processing.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I would instantly think I was just hearing things.
Right. Gaslighters weaponize this completely normative, healthy, social cognitive mechanism.
So it's like having your internal GPS hacked. You're driving along, looking out the window, and you see a massive lake right in front of you.
A huge lake, impossible to miss.
But the passenger sitting next to you, someone you deeply love and implicitly trust, keeps looking at the map and saying, nope, that's a highway. You're crazy. There's no lake.
And because of that trust, it works.
Yeah, eventually, because you trust this person's epistemic authority, you start to think your own eyes are deceiving you. You trust the passenger more than your own vision. It's like taking the blue pill in the Matrix without even realizing you swallowed it.
That is a perfect analogy. And what makes that GPS hack so devastating is that it targets your core competency as a human being.
It really breaks you down.
It does. The philosophical literature, particularly the 2014 work of philosopher Kate Abramson, defines this not just as manipulation, but as epistemic violence.
Epistemic violence. That is an intense phrase.
It is, because gaslighting isn't just lying. If I eat the last slice of pizza and tell you I didn't, I'm just lying to avoid getting in trouble.
Right, that's just the basic lie.
But if I eat the pizza and then convince you that you were the one who ate it and that your memory is failing you because you've been so stressed lately, the goal there isn't just to get away with a lie.
Oh, wow. So what is the goal then?
The goal is to destroy your status as a knower. It's to make you fundamentally incapable of trusting your own capacity to judge reality.
Destroying your status as a knower. That is incredibly heavy. And it makes perfect sense that this vulnerability is highest where our trust is highest.
Exactly.
Which explains why we see this most frequently discussed in the context of romantic relationships. If you don't trust the person, the hack doesn't work.
Right? It's spot on. Intimate partner dynamics are the classic breeding ground for this type of epistemic violence, precisely because the barrier to entry, that shared reality, is already established.
Let's dive into how that actually plays out behind closed doors. There's a really eye-opening 2023 study we looked at, published in the journal Personal Relationships.
Yes, a very important study.
Authors Willis Klein, Sherry Lai, and Suzanne Wood conducted a qualitative analysis where they interviewed 65 survivors of romantic gaslighting. And the data they collected completely upends the stereotype of what an abusive relationship looks like from the outside.
It really does. The testimonies from those 65 survivors reveal a very specific methodology. Gaslighting isn't just 24/7 cruelty.
Right, because if it was, you'd just leave.
Exactly. If a new partner is constantly mean to you from day one, your internal GPS works perfectly. You recognize the threat, and you get out of there.
So how do they bypass those defenses?
To bypass them, the gaslighter hijacks the typical flow of a relationship through extreme unpredictability. They mix periods of intense affection, often called love bombing, with sudden emotional abuse and cold shouldering.
It's like emotional whiplash.
That's exactly what it is.
The study highlights how a normal evening can instantly turn surreal. An argument starts out of nowhere. The gaslighter launches personal attacks, and then suddenly they switch back to being extremely affectionate and caring. It keeps the victim completely off balance.
And the tactical execution of this is insidious.
Yeah, it involves dismissing feelings, outright denial, like looking you in the eye and saying that conversation never happened when you both know it did.
And then shifting the blame to your character.
Like saying, you are always overreacting, or you're just too sensitive.
Right. And we really have to ask why the victim stays when that happens. The research points right back to that epistemic trust we were talking about earlier.
Because they still have those periods of intense love, right?
Yes. Because there are still periods of affection, the cognitive dissonance becomes overwhelming. The victim's brain tries to reconcile two opposing truths.
They're trying to make sense of the nonsense.
They think, This person loves me and cares for me, so why would they lie about something so basic? I must be misremembering. I must be the one who is flawed. The victim literally rewrites their own memory to preserve the relationship.
Wow. But wait, I have to ask this on behalf of anyone listening right now because, people argue in relationships all the time.
Oh, of course. That's totally normal.
People deny things. People genuinely remember events differently. I mean, human memory is notoriously faulty.
It really is.
So how do you, sitting there listening to this right now, know the difference between a normal, messy relationship argument and actual toxic gaslighting?
This raises such an important question, and the distinction is critical for anyone trying to evaluate their own relationships. The difference lies in the underlying intent and the scope of the conflict.
Okay, break that down for us.
In a normal argument, you are debating what happened. Like, you said you'd take out the trash. No, I said I'd do it tomorrow. You are debating the facts of a specific event.
Right, just a standard disagreement.
Gaslighting, on the other hand, is a systematic, prolonged attempt to destroy your capacity to judge what happened.
That is a massive distinction.
It is. The gaslighter isn't just arguing the facts. They are attacking your sanity, your memory, and your character. The ultimate goal, as the data shows, is to create total dependency.
Wow.
By eroding your confidence in your own mind, you become completely reliant on the gaslighter to interpret reality for you.
It's the difference between trying to win an argument and trying to win control of the other person's reality entirely.
Exactly.
But let's shift gears for a second. Because while romantic partners use emotional leverage to gain that control, what happens when the gaslighter has financial or structural leverage over you? Does this GPS hacking work in a corporate setting?
It absolutely does. But the mechanism of control is entirely different. In a job, there is already a built-in hierarchy.
You literally have a boss.
Right. You don't necessarily have deep emotional trust in your boss, but you depend on them for your livelihood, your performance reviews, and your career trajectory. That structural dependency makes workplace gaslighting incredibly effective.
There is a fascinating 2023 study from the Frontiers in Psychology journal by researchers Priyam Kukreja and Jatin Pandey from the Indian Institute of Management Indore. They actually conceptualized and validated a scale specifically to measure workplace gaslighting.
And the behaviors they documented are chillingly common.
Yeah, so what did they find?
Kukreja and Pandey found that workplace gaslighting usually involves supervisors chronically trivializing an employee's concerns, deliberately withholding critical information so the employee fails, and causing emotional pain specifically to maintain dominance.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It's often used by insecure leaders to mask their own incompetence. Like, if a project fails, the gaslighting manager will convince the team that the failure was due to the team's poor memory or lack of attention rather than the manager's poor planning.
Ugh, the withholding of information is such a classic, maddening move. You get a terrible performance review for not following instructions that were literally never given to you.
Exactly.
And when you point that out, the boss casually says, I told you that in the stand-up meeting on Tuesday, you just weren't paying attention. You've been really distracted lately.
It just makes you feel insane.
It really does. Some of the victims in these studies actually resort to secretly recording conversations or blind copying themselves on every email. Again, cue the Twilight Zone music, just so they have tangible proof that their own memories of meetings are accurate.
It becomes a necessary survival tactic when your professional reality is under constant siege.
Yeah, you have to protect yourself.
And we see the devastating toll this takes in a 2025 study published in the journal Healthcare by Aglaia Katsirumpa and her colleagues.
Oh, the one about the nurses, right?
Yes. They looked at how workplace gaslighting specifically affects nurses in Greece. The healthcare setting is inherently high stress, and when you add systemic gaslighting to that, the results are alarming.
I can only imagine.
This continuous invalidation of their professional reality leads directly to severe burnout, depression, and what we now call quiet quitting, where employees psychologically detach from their jobs just to protect their own mental health.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Gaslighting at work isn't always about a single toxic boss picking on a subordinate. Sometimes, the gaslighter is the entire organization.
Yes, the institutional level.
In the higher education and corporate literature, there is this wild structural concept being documented called green gaslighting.
This is a relatively new frontier in the research, bringing in work from scholars like Srinidhi B.S. and Dr. Zina Flavia de Souza in their 2026 systematic review. Green gaslighting operates purely on an institutional level.
I like to think of it like a massive corporate magic trick.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. A university or a Fortune 500 company flashes this beautiful, shiny PR brochure at you. It's full of buzzwords about sustainability, workplace equality, mental health awareness, and green energy.
They make a huge public spectacle of how much they care.
Exactly. That's the distraction. Meanwhile, behind the curtain, the operational reality is entirely different. They are quietly exploiting labor, ignoring internal complaints of harassment, or continuing heavily polluting practices.
And when employees point out the hypocrisy, what happens?
The institution points to the brochure and says, "What do you mean? Look at all our corporate responsibility awards. You're just being negative and not being a team player."
The psychological friction there is immense. The institution creates an official, documented reality that completely contradicts the lived experience of the people working inside it.
That's so manipulative.
It forces the employee to choose between believing the overwhelming corporate narrative or believing their own daily experience. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we really have to ask what happens when the institutions that are explicitly designed to heal us or protect us start using these exact same tactics.
Right. And that brings us to the most systemic and frankly dangerous forms of this phenomenon. Let's talk about medical gaslighting. We have a 2026 paper in the Journal of Racial and Ethnic Health Disparities by Chris Shane and Anthony D. Slonim.
Yes, as well as a 2025 study in BMC Medical Ethics by Yared Bokowen and Gilly Gabe.
The medical setting involves an extreme inherent power imbalance, right?
Absolutely. The doctor holds the specialized knowledge, the prescribing power, and the ultimate authority on the body. The patient is the vulnerable one in pain, seeking answers.
So how does gaslighting show up there?
Medical gaslighting occurs when healthcare providers minimize, dismiss, or flat out deny a patient's severe self-reported symptoms.
So you go in with chronic debilitating pain. You know something is deeply wrong with your body. But the doctor barely looks up from their chart, sighs, and says, "Your labs are normal. It's just stress. You're just anxious. Maybe you should try to lose some weight or practice mindfulness."
Which is incredibly frustrating for the patient.
Yeah, they don't run further tests, they don't investigate, they take a physical reality and attribute it to a psychological defect in the patient.
And we have to examine why this happens. While it can occasionally be malicious, the research suggests it is more often a byproduct of the modern medical system.
Like doctors just being overworked.
Exactly. Doctors are under immense cognitive overload, often seeing patients in 15-minute windows. Chronic, ambiguous pain is a complex puzzle.
And they don't have the time to solve it.
Right. When a provider doesn't immediately know the answer, rather than admitting a gap in their own medical knowledge, it is cognitively easier to categorize the patient as anxious or exaggerating. It's a subconscious defensive mechanism by the provider that acts as a profound form of gaslighting on the patient.
But the ethical and physical consequences of that cognitive shortcut are devastating. It delays necessary care, sometimes fatally, and it completely destroys a patient's trust in the medical system. I mean, why would you go back to a hospital that tells you your very real agony is just a manifestation of your anxiety?
You wouldn't. The betrayal of epistemic trust in a medical setting leaves patients feeling incredibly isolated. Furthermore, the sociological data shows this doesn't happen equally to everyone.
Right, there are systemic biases at play.
The dismissal of reality is heavily influenced by systemic biases, which leads us to the concept of racial gaslighting.
Now, before we get into this, I just want to be super clear here for everyone listening. We are impartially reporting on these sociological findings.
Exactly. We're not taking political sides here at all.
No, not at all. We just want to make it clear that we're exploring the structural frameworks these researchers use to understand power dynamics just based on the source material we have.
Yes, we're simply conveying the ideas from the literature.
Okay, with that said, this is where we look at sociological frameworks developed by scholars like Angelique M. Davis and Rose Ernst in 2019, and philosopher Cynthia Stark also in 2019. It's fascinating to see how sociologists are taking these interpersonal psychological dynamics and applying them to wider societal structures.
According to these sociological frameworks, racial gaslighting occurs when testimonies of racial injustice or systemic harm are systematically denied by the dominant culture.
So how does that work in practice?
When an individual or a marginalized community points out a documented inequity, the response from the institution isn't to evaluate the facts of the inequity. Instead, the tactic is to attribute the complaint to the victim's oversensitivity, or what the literature calls cognitive defects.
The researchers call this specific tactic displacing. It's a way of saying, You aren't actually experiencing systemic harm. You're just playing the victim, or you're being paranoid about normal policies.
It entirely takes the focus off the systemic issue, the actual facts on the ground, and places the blame entirely on the psychology of the person experiencing the harm.
It is the exact same underlying mechanism we saw in the romantic relationships, destroying the victim status as a reliable knower of their own reality, just scaled up to a societal level.
Yes, exactly. It is the denial of reality utilized as a tool to maintain structural power and control the dominant narrative.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Let's bring all these complex threads together.
That's a great idea.
It means that gaslighting isn't just a toxic personality quirk or a buzzword you throw at an ex who annoyed you. It is a highly effective, pervasive tool of power. And knowing how to spot the mechanics of it, whether it's a romantic partner mixing intense love with absolute denial, a doctor waving away your physical pain because they are rushed, or an entire organization hiding the facts while calling you a negative team player, is your absolute ultimate defense.
Absolutely. To summarize our key takeaways from this incredibly deep dive into the literature first, gaslighting is a systematic psychological attack designed to make you doubt your own epistemic competence.
It is about destroying your ability to trust yourself.
Second, it is so devastatingly effective precisely because it exploits our natural, healthy human need to trust others to help us make sense of the world.
And third, it operates across all domains of life, from the intimate confines of a relationship to the structural hierarchies of medicine and society.
It's heavy material, but understanding the machinery behind it really gives you the power to dismantle it.
It really does.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the most important takeaway from all these clinical and sociological studies is about recovery. Resistance and healing come down to reclaiming your own truth.
Validating your own reality is the antidote.
Exactly. Often, the research shows this requires physically and emotionally separating from the source of the gaslighting, whether that's breaking up, quitting a toxic job, or finding a new doctor who actually listens, and finding a trusted community to help you repair that hacked internal GPS.
Finding people who look out the window, see the lake, and say, yes, you aren't crazy, I see the water too. Thank you so much for joining us today in the Deep Dive Lab for this exploration.
It's been a truly illuminating journey through the research.
It really has. And if this deep dive helped you make sense of a confusing situation or gave you a new perspective, please remember to subscribe to the channel for more mind-expanding explorations into the science of our everyday lives.
We really appreciate everyone tuning in.
I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over today as you go back out into the world. If our shared reality relies so heavily on trusting the people around us to verify our experiences, how do we build a truly gaslight-proof society without becoming completely cynical and distrustful of every single person and institution we meet? Keep your eyes open, trust yourself, and remember, if you walk into a room and the furniture looks different, sometimes it's perfectly okay to trust that you aren't crazy. Someone might have actually moved the couch. See you next time.